No. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Russ is jumping the gun here because, I said
start the pre-show. So I'm like, all right, I guess I'll just start.
Okay, smart ass. Let's start the pre-show now. Go ahead, Russ.
I have to question the New York Jets GM Joe Douglas or Aaron Rodgers, whoever's the GM right now, because they had a really good pass rusher in Bryce Huff, and they let him go. So he gets signed by the Eagles. So the Eagles have a problem with their pass rusher, Hassan Reddick, and he gets shipped to the Jets. So nothing was talked about ever since then, right? But what we find out yesterday, when all of a sudden players are supposed to be in for OTAs, you don't have to be, mind you. But if you're a new player on a new team, you might want to talk to the defensive coach and defensive coordinator and maybe the head coach, who is a defensive guy. But he hasn't. He hasn't spoken to him since April. So he's clearly a holdout. And really all the Eagles did was pass their holdout problem on to the Jets, and the Jets willingly took it. And my question is, with everything else that you have going on with Aaron Rodgers and everything else, why didn't you just sign the guy that you had, knowing that he may not be the same quality of pass rusher as Hassan Reddick, but a really good one, and he played for your organization, and he was waiting for you to pay him, but you didn't do that. You went after the other guy who now is a holdout officially.
Well, I mean, okay, maybe he's not a holdout because you said they're voluntary, and I agree that you say you would think that he'd want to make a good impression on his new team, but it may be a thing is trying to play for a new contract. I mean, Kev, Buffalo has a similar, like everybody, like 89 of the 90 players showed up for their OTAs. The one guy who didn't show up was Rasul Douglas, who they traded for from Green Bay last year. He's entering the final year of his contract. He isn't a holdout because these were not mandatory. Mandatory mini camp is next week. Now, if Reddick doesn't show up, then you have something to worry about.
Is he has a $250,000 bonus. He'll probably laugh that off.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I don't know what the Jets are thinking. Probably the guy that they didn't sign, he wanted 5 or 6 years, and they didn't want to sign him for 5 or 6 years. And this guy's got a year left. Sometimes it just works out that way.
Or sometimes you get played.
Well,
I was just going to say, just the whole concept of these off-season voluntary, non-voluntary thing. It's so kind of over the top. I was driving by my local high school here, and it's the first week in June, and I see kids out there with T-shirts and helmets playing football. It's had a trickle-down effect. So now we have to have, even for high school, we have to have off-season. I mean, it's not. August practice for football is a tradition. It's hot. So.
I was surprised because I didn't know exactly how it worked, but apparently, like the NFL teams, they've had 3 weeks of OTAs. Let's 3 days a week. Like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks, or 2 weeks ago, last week and this week, they have mandatory minicamp next week. Then they break until training camp starts at the end of July. I'm talking about overkill. Jesus.
Yeah, but I do want to say this. So Huff got a 3-year deal, $16 million signing bonus, $34 million guaranteed. It's not a ton of money.
No, not a ton. Well, Kev, what were your thoughts? Because I don't think we've talked to you since the big contract Jared Goff. A lot of people in the NFL are not too pleased that he got, he's not a top like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, but he's a good quarterback. But he got what, $50 million?
Yeah, but what's strange about that, because I've seen the human cry about it, is this was predicted 5 months ago. Like just the way that the quarterback had escalated. I remember listening to talk radio, and the guy said, well, what we're hearing is just the percentage they'll go up, and the next guy that's up always has to take it to the next level. So we're guessing Goff will get about $50 million. Right. And, it was exactly that. And, it's almost like you're just establishing the pay grade for quarterbacks, regardless of how good. I mean, with quarterback, if you're a number one quarterback, I guess you're in the fraternity, you're in the club, we're going to pay you accordingly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you know what? I'm going to say, even though I remember I did a discussion with one of your students about this, Kev, and I said there was a limit to what I'd want to pay for Jared Goff. But if you look at it, and it's funny, you could ask Google, like, where does he rank? And, of course, then it starts pulling up all these rankings. But it seems like he's somewhere between 10 and 16. That's not a terrible amount of money for a guy who's somewhere between 10 and 16, and he is pretty effective. So I don't have a problem with that. I thought it would be worse than this.
I think you're also paying for the change he's made to the team in terms of, getting them farther than they had. And, I mean, you've heard me all lament that, one playoff win in my lifetime as a Lions fan, and now they have added 2 more. And Goff was the architect of those, number one. But the other thing, too, is, and this cannot be diminished or dismissed, and that is the intangibles. Like, he is also the head cheerleader. He rallies the guys. He celebrates the defensive plays. And he really has won over the fan base and his teammates. He's kind of that old school rah type. Let's get at them, boys. We can do this. And Detroit needed that. I mean, they've been so bad for so long that to have a guy that's a positive energy, and that's probably accurate in terms of. I would say he's 10. I would rank him maybe 10th. I mean, there's guys like Mahomes and stuff you want to have him, but he's a real good quarterback, and he hits his receivers. He can throw the deep ball. The one thing is, and this is the era of the running quarterback, and that's not him. He's got some escapability, but I'm going to put quotes around some. He's not a guy that's going to break out of the pocket, but this is kind of like monopoly money. We don't. What's 50 million? What's that mean now? I mean, once you get up to that level, whether it's 27 million or 50 million, like if someone said to you, "I'm going to give you $50 million," and then they came back the next day and they said, "Oh, we made a mistake. It's only 27 million," you'd still be pretty happy. And I think that's where the quarterbacks are these days. They do their part by pushing it forward in terms of the pay scale. But I think if Goff would have got 30 million, he'd probably be pretty thrilled by it as well.
Yeah, one last thing, because Terry brought it up. I had no idea this existed. So there's a series of videos, about 5 videos, where Charlie Huff will teach you how to throw the knuckleball. He's 76 years old. I think that's amazing. I always have been amazed by the whole knuckleball fraternity. R.A. Dickey was in that for a while when he won the Cy Young, and Charlie Huff will still teach you the knuckleball. It's great.
Now, what I don't understand is, and I wanted to add one more thing to the football conversation, and then we'll get into the hockey. What I don't understand is why somebody who throws 97 miles an hour, like say Garrett Cole, would not learn how to throw the knuckleball, because as a sort of a changeup. It's not stressful on the arm. In fact, it's very easy on the arm. So why wouldn't like pitchers who throw top speeds to lengthen their outings use the knuckleball? I think it's a missed opportunity, but teams don't seem to want to do that now.
I'm going to hearken back to my 1969 read of Ball 4 and Jim Bouton's efforts to learn a knuckleball. And just for him to discuss how long it takes to master that. So, it's almost too late in Cole's career.
Well, he did make it back to the majors, though, Bouton, with the Braves, right? So
Yeah, he did. And, when Hank Aaron took him deep, and one of the greatest lines ever in history, he said, "I hate to think how far he would have hit," because he thought he fooled him because he was going to throw him a fastball because he expected a knuckleball. And he said, "I hate to think how far he would have hit it had I not fooled him so badly." So.
Yeah, and the team that was the most angered by the Goff contract was Miami, because now Tua is going to look, because every prominent quarterback is going to look to make $1 million. Yeah, 1 million more, 2 million more. It's just going to keep escalating and escalating and escalating. So
yeah, I knew this is actually a story that would relate to even to the NHL as well. But years ago, because of a friendship I had with a fellow journalist named Ted Fryer, I got to meet Theodore St. Antoine, who at the time was the dean of the Michigan Law School, but he's primarily known in the sports world as the arbitrator for a lot of early cases, the Steve Kemp one. But the one that really bothered him, and he even told Ted and I this, was the farmer. Who was the farmer for the, can't think of his first name. It's with the White Sox.
Jim Farmer?
No.
Ed Farmer?
Ed Farmer. Ed Farmer. Ed Farmer was from the Chicago area.
Right.
And they were trying to decide, they had offered him $150,000, or I may not have the numbers right, but it's similar. And then he had asked for $350,000, and St. Antoine ruled in Farmer's favor. And even though he did, and he said it was a justified ruling, I had to do it because the 110, they were lowballing him, and he was a very popular guy in Chicago. Like, people came to see him pitch. They had watched him grow up in the area and all that kind of stuff. But he said, he said, the problem I have with it as a baseball fan, I know now they're all going to say, look, I'm much better than Ed Farmer. So if Ed Farmer's worth $330,000, then, I'm worth $700,000. And, he was right. I mean, that's what happens when you have to do that. But he was obligated back then. I don't know how they do it now in baseball, but he had to take one or the other. And so he thought that the $330,000 was more fair than the $110,000 or whatever it was. Yeah.
Right.
So.
All right, let's get started. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, June 5th, 2024.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology and NHLDraftBuzz.com.
I'm Kevin Allen, and I just have one job, Detroit Hockey Now.
And I'm Michael Agello, and I have multiple jobs, including the host of the Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, let's start. Russ will be wending his way to his favorite spot in June, and that's the NHL Scouting Combine. I call it the Draft Combine in Buffalo. And there's a lot of general managers here, Kev, most of the agents, a lot of the prospects, most of the prospects. We'll get to see them, throw up on Friday and Saturday and get, talk to them, take some pictures, and leading up to the NHL draft in Vegas. But a lot of the talk coming out of Buffalo has been, players that are potentially going to get traded, and a lot of groundwork is being laid here that may come to fruition later in the month in Vegas. A lot of the stuff, I know Pierre LeBrun reported about this yesterday, I want to start with is the goaltending musical chairs. And I know Detroit's involved in that. Toronto may be involved in that, but a team like New Jersey, who clearly had goaltending issues last year, they addressed it at the deadline. It was a little too late. They brought in Kaapo Kähkönen, who was a pending free agent, but Jake Allen, who had a year left in his contract. But that doesn't seem to be the final solution to them. They're looking at, maybe Ullmark, maybe Markstrom. The thing is, they're one of many teams that are looking for either a tandem goalie or a number one.
Yeah, but the one thing that I take from this week, and I thought it was a raised eyebrow for me, not that they'd be willing to do it, but that they would say so publicly, and that is Fitzgerald said that he would give up his first round pick. Now, the reason that's interesting is, and Russ knows this is not a team that's peddling a pick that's down in the 20s. This pick is number 10.
Right.
So if he's willing to do that, the price of poker has gone up in terms of getting one of these goalies, and it sure sounds like that would make him the chip leader at the table when it comes to get goaltending. I mean, if you have a chance if you're sitting there with Markstrom or Saros or Ullmark, and you have a chance to get the 10th pick in a decent draft, and and we all know, I've been talking about this for the last few times I've been on about how, the new deep dive into drafting clearly shows and demonstrates that if you're picking first and foremost in the top 5, you have almost a guarantee of getting a player. And then, but top 10 is also up there as well. And then after that, it's not nearly as good.
Right.
We've talked about in the past of, second round picks are like currency at the, and their productivity of getting real players has been limited.
Well, I think a factor in Conroy being so public in terms of, or I'm sorry, Fitzgerald, being so public in terms of what he would trade. Calgary, remember, they traded Lindholm, Tanev, Hannafin, and Zadorov. They have 8 picks in the first 4 rounds of this draft. They have 5 first-round picks over the next 3 years. The draft picks are currency, but I get the feeling that Calgary, and this apparently was the sort of the roadblock, they want like somebody like Dawson Mercer. They want a player who can step into the NHL right away. I don't know if they're interested, even though this is a good draft and it's a top 10 pick, Russ. I'm not so sure they're interested in a 10th overall pick when they want somebody who can step into their lineup.
No, I agree with that. I think that's going to be tough. But, for Allmark, yeah, I think Boston would do it because Boston needs to get more prospects in their system. They've had to make a lot of deals over the years. And most of the guys you see are most of the ones that are most of the ones that are up. So that would be a boon for them because they already have a goalie, right? So I think, Don Sweeney should be the first guy calling about that one because, like if I'm Trotz, it's a little different because even though I'm not a big Saros fan, obviously he's their guy and he's gotten them pretty far. So you have to look at that and say, well, Askarov's not ready yet. Now, he has to ask his guys, how many years is he away? If he's 2 years away, it's tough to make that trade. Like, you can't really trade Saros. So I don't think Nashville's going to do it. I think Boston is probably the most likely, and I think Calgary shouldn't do it only because I do feel like they need some players. They do have enough draft currency that, Calgary needs to get some actual players in the lineup. Otherwise, it's going to take a while for them. So if I'm Boston, I'm running for that deal.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being totally honest, I think Calgary is distant third in this, in this goalie race. Markstrom is desirable to be sure, but he's not Ullmark and he's not Saros, and for that reason. So I don't know that they're all that concerned about that. The other issue in this race, at the Boston Hockey Now story today, where they really just said, look, the Devils have all the pieces that to make this trade. Boston, they can satisfy Boston. Boston desperately needs to replenish their prospect system, their pool. And so they can just, add those kinds of things. And they're looking just to, get more cap space. They already got a pretty good amount this summer, but they want even more. And, it's just hard. I've said for years, sometimes, 2 goalies is too many and 5 is not enough. And that sometimes, happens. In this case, 2 is too many. You have 2 premium goalies who both want to play, both deserve to play. And you've got a situation like that. So they could do it. But again, I don't know, unless you've seen reporting on this, I have not, whether or not he's willing to go to New Jersey.
Well, the reporting was that the team that he blocked the trade to at the deadline was New Jersey. So I don't know whether, he's changed his mind. I mean, obviously Boston, their situation is Swayman is a ARB eligible restricted free agent this summer. They probably want to lock him up long term. But the problem is if you do and you sign him for $6-7 million, then you've got $12 million allocated towards goaltending. I think another factor of these 3 goalies we just mentioned is Saros has got a year left. Ullmark has got a year left. Markstrom's got 2. He's got 2 years left at $6 million. Now, Calgary's in a rebuild, reset mode. They might be willing to retain something depending on the return that they get from the Devils. But I think the second year is a factor there, and I believe he's 34 years old, so he's sort of on the precipice there. I mean, I think he's still a good goaltender, but goalies can drop off pretty quickly. So
yeah, the way I look at this, I mean, Boston traded Bernie Perron, so like, what could go wrong?
Yeah. I don't even think that the idea of keeping Ullmark is even a possibility.
Right.
Like, I think that bridge has been crossed. I don't think
Oh,
the idea that they're going to have $12 million in goalies is. And I think Ullmark knows that. I mean, he sounded almost resigned to the fact that he was going to have to go somewhere, but I don't know.
He wants to get through the season, and then he'll figure it out.
Well, no,
Right.
even though Don Sweeney came out a couple weeks ago and said, "Oh, I'd love to find a way to bring both goaltenders back again." Again, it's like lawyers and GMs. How do you know they're lying? Their lips are moving. It's like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's probably true. He'd like to have them both. Who wouldn't? But it's just unrealistic at this point.
Right.
And they're going to be a big. The 800-pound gorilla, I think, in the free agent market, because they have some money and they can get $5 million more. Now, they're going to have to go out and get, maybe look around to see if they want an upgrade at the backup goalie.
Well, they have somebody in their system. I can't remember the name, but they have somebody who played pretty well in Providence. That I think they said,
well,
was it Brandon Bussey?
Again,
oh yeah, I don't know.
I still think.
Yeah,
I think they still have to debate whether or not to upgrade that.
Yeah, it's a drop off from a Vezina Trophy winner to Brandon Bussey.
Well, but even when you're a contender, like, you got to have a guy that everybody recognizes as one of the better backups. That's all.
Plus, Swayman's still early in his career. He could have another little hiccup in a season.
Right.
Yeah, and the dirty secret, not so dirty secret, is Boston may be accumulating cap space to make a big splash on a center, because I'm sorry, I watched the team. They barely beat Toronto, and the Zacha Coyle 1-2 punch up the middle almost cost them losing to the Leafs. And then they had no offense and only won games in that series against Florida because of Swayman. They need a center. I mean, I think they're going to be
good luck getting a center, though. Like, seriously.
No, but I think Russ, I think they're going to be big on Elias Lindholm. They're probably going to overpay him. Or if Stamkos hits the market. I mean, there are centers.
I only had one Lindholm not necessarily come through in the playoffs, so they really want another one.
Yeah, I don't think they'll have to overpay him. I think that, they're a desirable team, and I think they'll want to go there. I mean, this is an opportunity. If you're going to Boston and you're a center, you're going to play.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, they've got real credible centers, like a guy like Charlie Coyle, but he's not a number 2. So
no, he's a great number 3, but he's not a number 2.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that will. I mean, those guys are going to get good money anyway. But it'll be interesting to see. Russ, do you still think it's 50-50 for Stamkos?
Yeah, I think it's less. I think it's 70-30 he's gone. I hear no rumblings about it. I don't see anything where they're going to even where they're trying to make a move to kind of keep him in there. So I think they're doing what you said, though. They're trying to get him to just come in for less, and I don't think he's going to do it.
They don't want him to come in for a lot less, just a little bit less.
But I don't know if he'll do that. I really.
But here's the interesting thing. I was talking to somebody about this, because the chatter after the trade for McDonough was, okay, they're going to trade Tanner Jeannot, who's got a year left. He's making 2.5, and they'll find a home for somebody like Connor Sheary, who's making $2 million. And then they open up 4.5, and with the other cap space that they have, they can sign Stamkos. Now the thing is, if Stamkos is willing to take, say, $6 million, $6.5 million, $7 million, something like that. Somebody else I talked to said, well, they're going to trade a Cernak or a Sergachev. But here's the problem. It makes no sense to have traded for McDonough if you were going to trade out a younger defenseman who's locked up long-term on pretty good deals. And plus, you've got Hedman to sign next year, who's been underpaid the last 7 or 8 years. So if it's a choice between Hedman and Stamkos to lock up, I'm sort of with Russ. I think that Brisebois is going to lock up Hedman and try to get Stamkos to take less. And if he doesn't take less, then he's gone. I mean, I don't know.
It doesn't seem like they're having like any kind of long negotiations. Like a month ago after the playoffs, he's like, yeah, Julian reached out to me. We had a short conversation. Like, it just doesn't seem like they're putting enough effort into it, Tampa, to really get it done.
I mean, and I don't have this, in style, but I was told is that everyone guesses. He called them and said, don't give up on us. You know where we stand. We'll get it together. And Stamkos, wants to go back. Like, I don't know. I think it's more than
got 3 weeks to get it done. If it comes to July 5th or whatever the day is for free agency and he's not signed, he's going to listen up.
Some other.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. No, they're not moving Cirelli.
Yeah, they're not moving Cirelli. They're not moving Point. They're not moving Hagel.
No, they've already kind of said that.
Yeah.
That they're not doing any of that. So, they got to do it with the people they had. Now, I don't know. I mean, what I don't know the answer to, has Stamkos, gotten mad over something that we don't know about. So,
I mean, he was mad at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, he wasn't happy then. That's true.
Right, and if you use the blueprint that Brisebois and Yzerman before him have followed, Killorn, McDonough, Palat, they got to their early 30s. They wanted long-term extensions, and they said, "See you later. Thanks for the service." I mean, it's smart because they're not locking themselves up on guys who are probably starting to in the declining years of their career. But Stamkos, I thought, was different because he's been extremely important for that team ever since he was drafted first overall in 2008. And I just can't imagine in my mind's eye Steven Stamkos in anything other than a Tampa Bay uniform.
Sure. Here's the weird thing, though. So the quote from Brisebois, like on May 1st, was, he's a priority this offseason.
Right.
Well, I mean, we're at June 5th. How much of a priority? I would have thought if he's a priority, we'd have seen the blueprint of trades or something to make that happen.
Yeah, but I mean, haven't we seen? I mean, I see that a lot in Detroit. I mean, Yzerman said Larkin's a priority. Then he just hammered on him in negotiations. And then when it was done, he ended up giving him, what he needed to get done. And those guys are fine. So
I know
Larkin probably really didn't want to leave the area. And I think if forced, Stamkos would leave the area. I think that
but I would argue that he wants to stay in Tampa as much as Larkin wants to stay in Detroit.
Right.
He may have the personality to go anywhere, but but I think he does want to stay there. I think that's been his home for a long time.
Yeah, and I know that there was a big deal made when the McDonough deal was announced that McDonough had contacted Stamkos.
Right.
But the thing is, if I'm sure between the two of them, they're fine. But the organization, they had $6 million of McDonough's contract, of McDonough's in terms of cap space. And Stamkos is probably looking at this and saying, okay, well, they can sign me. They got room. Oh, there's $6 million that's just gone now.
Just made it worse.
Maybe they made it worse. Or maybe he wanted to say, look, you got to do something about the defense, too. Yeah. If I want to take back, I want to,
I mean, he was used to making 8.5. He had a year where he is worth at least 9. What could possibly be the lowest that he would accept?
Well, I was kind of trying to find this up here because he's not worth 9. Let me find the thing.
You don't think he's worth 9? He had 30-something goals.
Not at his age. You don't give those guys that. I mean, there's on Twitter here. There's the comparables.
He's probably like Pavelski when he signed with Dallas. He's probably a 7.5 times 3 years.
He's better than Pavelski.
I know he's better than that, Russ, but that's probably what they're going to try to get him at. And
you don't.
Go ahead, Kev.
Well, I was just going to say, what he produced, yes, but at his age, don't forget he wants some years too. Right. So, giving him 9, I don't see anybody giving him 9.
Right, and it's a third. The only positive is it's not a 35 and over contract. He's 34. So
Right.
you could sign him to a 5-year deal and then 3 years into it, buy him out. I mean, I don't know. It's a difficult situation. And I mean, we're going to find out in less than 4 weeks what's going to happen. But the other thing that Pierre LeBrun wrote about, and it's also folds into the goaltending scenario. And I know when we talked about goalies a few weeks ago, I mentioned the name John Gibson, but we always mention him, and then it turns out that it never comes to fruition. Well, LeBrun's reporting that he talked to Pat Verbeek, and Verbeek did not close off the possibility of Gibson being traded. He's got a modified no trade. He's got 3 years left at $6.4 million. I've said for 3 or 4 years that ever since that Anaheim went into sort of like the rebuild mode, that it was sort of a waste to have a good goaltender like Gibson playing on a rebuilding scenario like Anaheim. I mean, Kev, do you think that the $6.4 million in the 3-year term is a positive or negative?
Yeah, that's the question. Because I think it's a tough call. Only because Gibson has not been the Gibson of old.
Right.
Like if he was the Gibson of old, then for sure it would be a positive. You got him locked up. Like 6 is not unreasonable. So I would see it as a positive, but I think you got to think twice now on that contract, just because we don't know where he is. Like it might be easier to trade him once you see him at the start of the season. So
now, Russ, the name of Trevor Zegras apparently has been popping up more, and we heard it throughout the season. I don't know how serious we took it because he was injured at that point. But then his name keeps popping up, and I know that it clearly is something where maybe they just don't think he's a fit now that they have McTavish and they have Leo Carlsson, that they can feel free to trade Zegras to address other areas of need. I mean, I don't know why things have soured so much on Zegras.
It was just, I think everybody's just taking it because Verbeek got annoyed when he held out. Then he got hurt, and he kind of got hurt maybe because he held out, right? So I think there was a little bit of bad blood there or whatever. But at the end of the day, you're still talking about a guy who in his top year will probably get 80 points in this league, whether he plays defense or not. Right. And I don't think he's just a guy that gets written about. I don't think Anaheim is really going to shop him unless they got some sort of offer that bowled him over. So, like, as an example, if you had Flyers fans saying, well, hey, we'll trade you Travis Konechny, that's not going to get it done. This guy's 23 years old. Right. So it's going to take a package of picks and a player that's really desirable to get a guy like this, because he has everything you want offensively in this league: speed, skill, all of that. Maybe he doesn't play great defense. Maybe he needs to mature just a little bit. But the kind of skill that he has, they're not just giving it away.
Right.
Yeah. I did find what I was looking for, and this was an analytical projection based on comparables. Okay. And at his age, with the season that he had and desiring at least 3 years, his rate is 6.1%.
Yeah, that's baloney, though, because think about it. Ovechkin got in 2021. Now, this is Ovechkin, but still, in 2021, got a contract worth $9.5 million a year for 5 years.
Yeah. Well, as much as I love Stamkos, he is not Ovechkin.
No, I get it, but he's also not a $6.1 million guy either.
And I think one of the factors that Brisebois is looking at, remember, this is a guy who's had serious injuries, multiple injuries over his career, but he's come through it. And I mean, what did he score? 40 goals last year? He's still a great player.
Yeah.
I mean, if they lowball him, I don't think it's not an impossibility that he goes to New York or he goes to Boston or he goes someplace like that. Preferably a team in Tampa's division, and sticks it to him. So I don't know.
Here's my other point, though. So Joe Pavelski's now retiring, right? He got $5.5 million this year. Mm-hmm. He's now retiring. Stamkos isn't in that situation. He's not that old, and he's better than Pavelski.
Well, I said, Russ, that, and this would have to be adjusted based on what the cap was when he signed with Dallas. But the first deal with Dallas, I think he signed, was a 3-year deal at $7.5 million. and people thought that they were nuts. And it turned out to be a good deal for them because Pavelski still had a lot left in the tank. But he started to slip this year. But
I was just saying, according to the guy on Twitter, if I'm going to pay Stamkos 6.1 and Pavelski a year from retirement got 5.5 for 67 points, like something's wrong with the math. I mean, no offense. I mean, I'm just saying that's where I have a problem with it.
Unfortunately, I mean, you may not like it, but age has. Look at what.
I get it.
Patrice Bergeron, got late in his career.
Yeah.
And he was still a very, very,
That's
very
also
good.
Staying in Boston. Like, when does Boston ever pay anybody?
Well, I get that, but it's what Breezeball's trying to do in Tampa.
Well, Russ, they
paid him less because they wanted to stay competitive. That's what Breezeball's trying to do.
Right, Russ. They finally did. They finally did pay market value for Pasternak and for McAvoy. But
Bergeron never got it.
Bergeron took $2 million. I mean, it was like he wanted to come back for a year, and he was always underpaid. But now one more thing before we make our predictions, and do a little analysis of the series if you like. I heard Elliot Friedman talking today yesterday on the radio regarding how big Utah might be as a player in free agency and trades. Now they have 20 picks in the top 3 rounds over the next 3 years, and they have a boatload of cap space. So, Kev, it sounds like Ryan Smith is going to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
They don't have. I think they have 1 or 2 defensemen under contract. And I think and may have not been Friedman. I can't remember. It was one of the insiders. So forgive me if I overstated, but it was somebody authoritative who said that they had heard Utah was going to go after both Carolina defensemen Pesce and Brady Shea in free agency. Yeah. And that would add up, but I mean, they can't blow their wad and spend all their money right away. But I think they're motivated to take some steps this year.
Yeah, and there's always, not that they have all the information, but there's always indicators in whatever you're doing. You hear them talk about economic indicators. Mm-hmm. Well, an indicator of Utah being is that the betting world has already listed them among odds among the favorites for a lot of different free agents.
Sure. Yeah, they're going to be aggressive. There's no doubt.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's
43 million in cap space.
Yeah. So they can get who they want. They can certainly get who they want. They're a team, if he can convince someone to go there, that could really, get one of the goalies. They could move that. And most of the general managers don't feel as I do about the draft. They're still thinking we'll get that second round pick. We'll get 3 second round picks. And, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does. If you have 2 or 3, your chances have increased.
Improved.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, well, we do know. I mean, I brought this up before because the guy that did the study showed this. If you can go up to 10 draft picks, you go from getting an average of 1.8 players out of each draft year to 2.1. So you can get 2 full players if you can get up to 10 draft picks.
I mean, based on our age and stuff, if there was a writer's draft, if you were a second round pick, Kev, you're assured. Like you're a guarantee. Me and Mike, I mean, it's going to be, a game time decision on which one makes it, which one doesn't. Maybe one of us toils in the minors for a little bit. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Oh, we should have brought.
I'm bigger and tougher, so you're screwed, Russ.
We're writers. We're not really hockey players.
we really needed to talk on the pregame on about the who's going to replace Angel Hernandez.
Oh gosh.
Because the guy on down in the Rangers, we've already seen the video of the announcers going nuts, and I was watching that game. And oh my God, he missed some. I mean, he was Hernandez too on some balls and strikes.
These umpires are going to rush in robotic umpires. It's a shame, but they're going to usher it in.
Well, the thing about it that and one of my students did a really nice piece on robotic umpires for his final exam. But he didn't have this, and I didn't know it either. They've done a study of robotic umpires versus thing on pitches only on the outside. Okay, so not high or low, but on the outside. And they have determined that whether you're a human or a robot, you're 50-50 on that outside. You're
Okay, that's interesting.
50-50.
My two things is if they could program a robot to be like Ron Luciano, I would hire the robot. And the other thing is when you throw an Eephus pitch, I think that's going to throw the umpire off because out of the hand, it looks like it's going to be, one thing, and then it ends up in the strike zone in the end. And like, I think the trajectory is going to throw off a robot umpire.
Well, it shouldn't because the laser is going to call the pitch on the front of the plate. So, wherever it crosses the plane on the front of the page, that's why, Freeman, and I loved this interview where he said that good hitters, and I think we'll count him among them, are going to have to adjust because the strike zone is called now on the back of the plate. That's why framing still works.
Right.
But the robot umpires call it at the beginning of the plate. So if you have a real sharp breaking, what do they call it? Sweeper. If your sweeper's going across that plate, where the guy catches it at may not be where it nicked that front part of that plate because it's
right. You don't have like line where the catcher lines up now isn't going to matter as much for sure.
By the way, sweeper has come into the vernacular in like the last 2 years. I absolutely hate it. It's it's not a different pitch. It's like this pitch came out of nowhere. I mean,
no, but it breaks. The pitchers now can break it off sharper, and so it has this illusion of going, horizontal. And so someone needed to sort of differentiate between a normal slider, the back foot slider, and one that just looks like it's making a left turn.
I mean,
right-handed pitcher.
Mike sounds like he wants everybody to still say slap shot instead of one-timer. Like, does it really matter that much?
They're two different things.
They're not really that different.
I know I want to get back to the final only because I wanted to bring this up because, I haven't heard this discussed, but that it is fascinating to me, because players say all the time that they can compartmentalize, contract negotiations, but I've never believed that. I think it weighs heavily on your mind because it's your future and all that. Right. And yet I look at Sam Reinhart. I mean, he could be on a different side of the planet, next year, but it doesn't seem to bother him. He's just keep going on. But here's a second element that I wanted to bring up. If you're an Edmonton fan, would you say to yourself, well, if we win this, then we'll, Draisaitl's going to want to come back, or will he? If he wins a cup here, my question to you is, does he say to himself, well, I won my cup in Edmonton. I proved
now it's time to get paid.
Yeah, to become the guy, to move on, to be get to a place that isn't minus 30 in the winter. So
I've been told Draisaitl likes it there so much that people don't really foresee him leaving. So I think you have to ask that question, I think, more of McDavid than of Draisaitl. I think Draisaitl's re-signing there regardless.
Yeah, but okay, Draisaitl signed a sweetheart deal for $8.5 million.
Yeah,
he's been one of the best 2 or 3 players in the league for the length of that contract. He deserves, and I believe, what is he? He was 2014 draft, so he's the same age as Reinhart.
Yeah,
he deserves. I'm sorry, he deserves probably to be paid on the level of Matthews at 13.25, maybe more. The cap's going up. But that'll make it tough for them in a couple years to sign McDavid. Then McDavid's $15 million, and as we've known from Toronto, you can't play. You're paying Darnell Nurse $9.5. You're paying those two guys $28, $29 million. It gets to be tough to win when you're paying those players that much.
Well, here's another conundrum.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say another salary of a player close to that caliber. So Mikko Rantanen's in his final year, and he's at 9.2, and he's got a modified no trade. Like, he's getting a raise. Like, this guy's 100 points a year now.
Yeah.
And so that's another guy who I kind of wonder if Colorado's talking to him because if they feel like they can't get him signed, what they might do.
Well, their only advantage with him is that he's a winger, and like they would have to probably get over Nylander's 11.5. He probably makes 12.
Yeah,
but then they have to pay Makar. I mean, that's the problem. Kev, it's tough. It's tough in this league to keep these teams together when you have too many superstar players because they all have to be paid.
Yeah, they do, but let me remind what I talked about last week, where the GM made a really valid point that it is interesting that reporters don't keep up with the increase in the salary cap. That we have all of our thinking and the way we write is based on what has happened before. So
right.
if we see a $10 million jump, and I don't know, but we hear that it's going to be impressive, that the jump over the next couple of years.
Right.
What percentage of that does Connor McDavid deserve as the top player? Like, I don't think it's unrealistic that he should get 30% of that or 40% of that.
Right.
Because So if it's going to go up by 10 million, it may not change. They'll be able to afford these superstars.
Well, I'm just going to say though, like Nylander's not even close to Rantanen's
No.
league.
No, I wasn't saying. I wasn't saying
that. Was 55-50, and this year he was 42-62. He's in Kucherov territory. That's where he is.
Well, right, and the thing is, though, the max that anybody can make is 20% of the cap, and 20% of 90 million is 18 million. So, I mean, do I see McDavid making 18 million?
I do.
I do, but I don't know if Edmonton can do it. So
why? The cap goes up.
Well, I mean the cap, but Draisaitl and Nurse and some of the other contracts that they have will be on the books, and it might not be. I mean, I can't see them. He's only going someplace else if he wants to go someplace else. I mean, I think I still don't know.
What's going to hurt him is Bouchard's contract is up after this year,
right?
And he's going to be an $8 million defenseman at least,
easily. Yeah. All right, let's make our predictions here. The Stanley Cup. We're not going to have a show on Friday because Russ and I will be at the Combine in Buffalo.
Eating wings somewhere.
Eating wings at an there won't be at the Anchor Bar because we don't want to die.
It'll be Gabriel's game. Yep.
No, it's not going to be.
No, that's not an event going on, so it might be.
Yes, dumb. I'm not gonna say where. And Russ, shut up. So game one of the Stanley Cup Final will not be till Saturday. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they said the reason why was because if Dallas had won, first of all, they didn't want to conflict with the NBA Final, and if Dallas had won, there would have been a conflict with the Mavericks and the. Now I didn't think the Mavericks and the Stars played in the same building, but if they played it in the same town at the same time, that would be a conflict. And the NHL never wants to play on the same night as the NBA. But anyway, it's not starting until Saturday. Starting in Florida. And Kev, I'm sure you're happy that you're not traveling for this series because 3,000 miles each way. No, thank you.
Yeah, no, that would be just vicious. That to say the least. Just in terms of our picks, because we're running out of time, I really want to pick Edmonton in this series. I want Draisaitl and McDavid to get their chance to turn it up, but I just can't do it with Bobrovsky being in net and I just don't have the faith in the Oilers goaltending that it will be nearly as good as the Panthers going. So I'm taking the Panthers in 6.
Ross?
Yeah, I've given some glowing reports on Edmonton leading up to the Cup. And same as Kevin, I tried to look at it a bunch of different ways, how they were going to win this. And I don't see how they're going to do it either. Florida's too deep. It's just they have guys who aren't even scoring at their full potential. Florida, imagine if they do. So I'm going to say Florida in 5, just because I think they really could lay a smackdown on them, and they also know how to bottle up some scores. So I think it's going to be a problem for Edmonton.
Yeah, I'm not going to be that bold, but it could be. Everybody knows. I mean, everybody in the chat for the last 20 minutes. Well, Mike's going to take Florida. Of course, he's going to take Florida. Well, yeah, I'm going to take Florida because they're the better team. I'm not saying. I mean, Edmonton got here on the power of Draisaitl and McDavid and Bouchard playing really well, and Skinner not costing them. But in every aspect, goaltending, Florida's better. Defense, Florida's better and deeper. Up front. Yes, Edmonton's got Draisaitl and McDavid, and Hyman's really good. But I think Florida 1 through 12 is better up front than Edmonton is. So, and I think the thing that I'm looking forward to, if Florida plays like they did against Tampa and Boston and New York, where Bennett, Lomberg, Cousins, Kachuk ran them out of the building, hit Pasternak, knocked Marchand out, targeted Panarin. That's what they do. They go after your best players. McDavid better keep his head on a swivel because they're going to go at him. Now, they may get penalized. Their penalty killing is pretty damn good. The Rangers power play saw that. But so if they can absorb that, they will lay a hurting on Edmonton's key players. And I think that will be the difference. And, Barkov against McDavid, as Andrew in the chat. Yeah, I mean, it won't – let's just say it won't be up to one player. It's going to have to be a team defensive concept. You cannot assign one player to McDavid to try to shut him down. But I think, I think they're better in all aspects, so I'll take Florida in 6. So there you go. And all the Oilers haters unite. We'll watch this series and rub our hands with glee.
I'm not an Oilers hater.
I know.
Me neither. I like their team. So
yeah. Anyway. All right. We'll be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.